some of those pictures or videos.
Yeah, I'll send you some videos because they're on the iTunes. So I got some short videos of me talking to some stuff I'll send you.
Yeah,
Short.
cool.
Yeah, I think you'll like it. Yeah. So
All right, you ready?
yeah, yeah.
All
Like
right,
I
let's
said,
remember.
I put two on the and the if you
I'm
could,
not gonna read self-reflection because I think
that's fine.
we
That's fine.
we
But
we beat
self
that one
gratitude would
up.
be good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think this is good. And it's I just had some thoughts that I'm gonna save for this recording. But as soon as you're ready, I can begin.
Yeah,
Let's
we're going.
remember.
Like I said, we're on the same page. You're gonna we're going with self gratitude, and read the definition, and then we'll just go from there. And
Yep.
then, like you say, you could say what inspired it, and I'll take it from there. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
better.
Well, I think let's remember to laugh.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Makes a big difference. Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, co-host, and colleague Jim Gurley. And we had another. I keep saying I'm not going to say this anymore, Jim, but we had another robust pregame. And as always, we're going to tie the topic today to the wheel and the self. And today's topic is self-gratitude. And Jim can share how he came across this, the motivation behind choosing this topic for today. But I'm going to read the definition that Jim found online of self-gratitude and then pass the microphone over to Jim. But before I do that, let me just ask and remind everybody, if this stuff resonates with you, if you think that other people might benefit from it, help us get the word out. Just head over to Apple. That's probably the easiest place to go. Give us 5 stars or 4 if you're not over the moon, and write us a quick review, just a sentence or two, because the more of those that we get, the more eyes and ears come upon us. And I think that some of this stuff is helpful. So please do that. Enough said about that. Let's move on. The definition of self-gratitude means appreciating and acknowledging yourself for who you are and what you've achieved. It's about recognizing your own efforts, strengths, and value rather than constantly seeking external validation. Practicing self-gratitude involves being your own biggest supporter and treating yourself with kindness and compassion. And Jim, I'm smiling as I'm reading this thing because it's like, oh, that's not very easy to do. At least for me. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not easy to do. In fact, it's one of our probably most common quotes. We grow bitter or we grow better, and the default is bitter. So it requires a lot of work, a lot of self awareness, a lot of self reflection in order to have gratitude and be grateful for these little things. Because it's especially as you grow older, you can grow angry and mad at the world, or you can grow grateful with gratitude. So yeah,
I think the most powerful kind of thing for me around this as I was reading it is that this is a choice. This is not an easy choice, but it's a choice. And the alternative, to your point, becoming a bitter old man, I'm not choosing that. Now, am I going to end up one of those? Well, that's kind of in God's hands, I suppose. I would bet no. I would bet money, big money, no, because it's always going to be a choice. And I
yeah.
also
And not
see,
just bitter old man, bitter old women. They're just as bitter and just as angry as men.
yeah,
So it goes
yeah,
both ways.
yeah.
It's not unique to just men. But
I wonder if there's any data on what percentage of the population over the age of 50 have chosen bitter versus better. It's probably hanging out somewhere online, but
it's default. The default is bitter. And often it's regret they didn't do something, or resentment that somebody did something better. It ties into self-reflection too, comparing
yeah,
yourself to others. It's another one of my favorite quotes, right? All comparison leads to misery.
yeah. There's a number of quotes about comparison out there. That's actually on my list of things to surrender every day is comparison,
Yeah.
and gratitude is part of my morning routine. I try to thank God throughout the day. But I think to your point, you bring up regrets. People talk about regret in a couple of different ways. Some people will express the feeling they have no regrets. I find that impossible. I don't think that's possible. I think they're choosing a more optimistic reflection on perhaps some choices they made that they're going to choose not to regret them when in fact they are regrettable.
You know what, Mark? As I think, the greatest regret is they didn't do something. They didn't take the chance. They didn't say something to somebody before they passed. They didn't take the risk, fear of failure.
No question. No
The
question.
regret is often not what they did and failed, what they did, what they didn't do and never failed. So
Yeah.
it's really an interesting way to look at regret.
Well, when I
I
go,
made that decision years ago. Um, I'd rather try and fail than to grow old and then be angry that I didn't try, be mad at myself for not trying.
yeah, I think that when I think about regret, and I do, because that's also on my list of things to surrender every day. There's about 7 of them. And I think that the way that you reflect back on your choices can make something regrettable or make something not regrettable. So you still have some level of control because you can't do everything, right? All of us have things that we chose not to do, not because we were scared necessarily, even though we might have been, but because we didn't have the bandwidth to do it, or it wasn't aligned with the other things that we were doing at the moment, or there weren't the resources available until later to do that thing that was physical in nature. So now I'm too old to do it because I wasn't able to do it earlier. So I think the way that you reflect back on things gives you some control over them because you can just turn the regret on if you want, or you can turn it off and say, look, I'm not playing that game with myself, right? Because I can drive myself insane, especially the thing that you mentioned about not saying the thing that you wanted to say to someone who's now passed away. Those can be terrible. I think of things that I could have said to my mother, but I also said a lot of things to her that were very helpful and very honest. So the thing about self-gratitude that I like when I look at this definition, it's really how you talk to yourself. It's really your inner voice, your inner critic. It's like and you know what I was thinking of as we were talking about it in the pregame is for some reason I have recently had a number of people who I'm collaborating with in some capacity say very complimentary things about me. You just said a couple of them. No, that was very well said, Mark. Or you really have a way of saying things. And you've congratulated me or thanked me many times over the years about helping you with something and reflecting with you on something or adding a different viewpoint to something. And you'll
it's
say
gratitude, right?
It's gratitude. It's gratitude. But it's like you also, at least in my opinion, you get credit for that too, because you're grateful. You're not accepting it as criticism. You're accepting it as advice or a different perspective. So you have the ability to throw that back in my face, and you've never chosen to do that, right? So it's an interesting thing that how much of this do we have control over, and how much of it is giving control of whatever it is over to something or someone else? That's where the choice is, in my opinion.
Yeah, reminds me another quote: "The most important conversation you'll ever have is the conversation with yourself." And that conversation with yourself is either positive or negative. And some people are just wired to see the negative in everything. And because that's the default, right? That's the bitter part versus somebody that is seeking things to be grateful for. And who do you want to be around more, right? Who motivates you or inspires you to want to be your best self? That's somebody that's positive, that's looking for the positive in things. So it is a choice, but like you said, it takes a lot of work. And I recently appreciated this because a very good friend was turning 47, and we were having this conversation. In the beginning of the day was self-reflection, right? Maybe the negative things, the things you don't do or you wish you did, and how your life could be different. And then the conversation evolved in, wow, look at all the positive things. And then just almost immediately you heard the tone of voice change, just and how they saw the world. It's also the power of having a close friend or somebody that you trust that helps you see the positive.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a conversation. Most important conversation you'll have is with yourself, and that's a crazy person, right? Because you're going to repeat the same thing over and over again. That's what we do.
It's an interesting conversation. It doesn't seem like we can do an episode of this without my divorce coming up, but when I reflect back on that choice, which without context, you could say that was one of the worst choices you could have made, right? But when you add the context in it, you start to see it make sense because people change and you don't know certain things. But when I look at that choice in the mirror of, yeah, but look at my 3 kids. It's like, wow, I'm very grateful for having made that choice. So that's a perfect example for me of how I could look at something with disdain or complete gratitude and appreciation. It's totally a choice. It's totally a choice.
The other thing that this falls into, when again back to self-reflection and gratitude, is the term life's work. I never thought much about it, but then you start to think about all the things that you've done. What's your life's work, right? In your case, you're helping people with their careers. That's your life's work. What's interesting about the term life's work, it's not always about money, right? It's about a passion. It's about an activity. It's who you are. And often it's a cause or something that you feel strongly about, and it's your life's work. You're going to do it to the end.
I think that it's we reflect at our age on things differently than you like to do that. Things happen in 5 and 10 year increment thing, and yes. I'm becoming more of a fan of that framework, if you will. But it's you don't think about your life's work when you got your whole life ahead of you.
So
right?
True.
Yeah. You think about your life's work when you don't have your whole life ahead of you.
Yeah. When you're half dead, which
and I'm like
right now, right?
I got some fucking catching up to do, man.
And we talked about this, I think it was last week, about your legacy. And the legacy doesn't have to be about ego, but it has to be your sense of purpose, right? What's something you want to leave behind to make the world a little bit better before you're gone.
Take the example of the friend and how it began with the conversation of regrets, and it evolved into a conversation of gratitude, and how the whole energy in the room changed. I could see your face change as you were just talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I had to tell you, it felt very good for me because they were comparing themselves to others, and it was like, the one thing about the comparison, you can always compare yourself to somebody that you think has it better, maybe because they have a bigger house or a bigger car or whatever else. But then start comparing yourself to the other people, and you can start feeling pretty good about yourself very quickly. It's really interesting how the mind can do that.
It did. I remember in some of my darkest times having that conversation with myself when I was feeling sorry for myself or whatever, and how did this happen and all that other stuff. And I'm like, dude, just look at a newspaper. Just turn on the news. You want to see how grateful you should be? Go ahead and start comparing yourself to the rest of the world. You can certainly put yourself down doing that. I had a consultant.
How about relationships with other people that care about you, that relationships, having children. Not everybody has children, right? There's so many things to be grateful for, but it takes some work. And
I think it's like I said earlier, I think it's a muscle. Everything seems to be a muscle to me. It's like it's constant repetition over extended periods of time. It also
has a lot to do with your environment. If you're in a negative environment all the time, and everybody around you is mad and negative, then of course that's going to be your perspective in life.
Well, there's your equally, choice.
Even being alone, being isolated, not having interaction with other people, which is pretty common these days, right? Especially if you're working at home. So there's a lot of factors.
I think one of my routines, as I've told you before, is a 3-pronged kind of meditation visualization where I go the 5 key areas of my life: God, my kids, my work, my health, my girlfriend, love, 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 love. Just a momentary toss some love that way. And then it's my what I want to surrender, where the comparison is, and regret is, and self-doubt is, and and impatience and pride. Is a list of about 7 or 8 of them. I just write them down and get them. Then I visualize giving them to God and saying, I'll see you tomorrow. They're all yours for the rest of the day. And he walks with a little guy that's my inner critic. And I just say, hey, be nice to me today, little guy. And then I visualize a pleasant place that I expect and hope to get to with regard to my success moving forward for the rest of my life. And I think that's a muscle that if I continue to do that, it's been a few years now, I've been doing it every day, that it's not going to get weaker. It's going to get stronger. And I can feel it sometimes, because most of the time I don't feel any benefit from this exercise in self-gratitude. But then the next day or the next day, something like 4 or 5 things will happen in a row. And I'm like, man, I'm so grateful to be receiving this compliment or receiving this opportunity or receiving this project or whatever it is, meeting this person who at Starbucks who I've never met before. And we end up talking for an hour and a half about cool shit. It's just
Yeah,
like,
but that's impact, right?
yeah.
Maybe it's a question for you. How do you think gratitude is related to having an impact? And it could be one person, it doesn't have to be thousands of people. But yeah, I think ultimately we want to know we've had an impact on a person or a group of people
Mm-hmm.
over time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like I'm visualizing as you're talking, when I used to walk into a room to train a bunch of people or give a presentation to a bunch of people or whatever, and it's just like my attitude when I open that door, whatever, even if it's not a door, if it's a Zoom call, the proverbial door, I consciously go, I am gonna fucking light this room up, right? And I get really grateful for the opportunity, and it does the energy. You can just feel it. You can feel it, and when you go in and you're in the visiting side of that, and somebody comes in to give a speech and they're monotone and they're boring and they might even be sad, it's like, dude, what the fuck, that the energy just gets sucked out of the room. So yeah, impact is palatable.
yeah, I don't know, all these quotes are coming to me today. But the other one is it's speaking to what your point of a talk. It's it's not what you say; it's the way that you made them feel.
Yep, that's Maya Angelou, I believe.
Yeah, but that is so true, so true. There was the energy that speaker had that made you feel a certain way, and that had an impact on you, how you view the world, or how you became inspired by another story or even your own story. But yeah, going back to the self gratitude, it's one is recognizing your own efforts, strengths, and values rather than consistently seeking external validation. So this is like an internal thing, right?
Well,
And
it's all the good stuff is internal, right?
yeah,
I think seeking external validation is something that we all make the mistake of doing. You were talking earlier about still wanting to please your mom. That's everyone does that, right? We all do. We all seek validation. Even my older brother who says, I don't give a shit what anybody says about me or thinks about me. Yeah, he does. He just
you're right.
doesn't allow it to get inside and
Yeah,
impact
I
the way he
I
treats other people, you
yeah,
know?
I think yeah. To add to what you're saying, I think at the core, all humans want really the same thing, the one thing, and that is uh, to belong to something, and then contribution.
Yeah.
Belonging and contribution. They want to belong to somebody that values their contribution, and they're either recognized for it or valued for their
Yeah,
contribution.
in the context of what I do for a living, I talk to a lot of leaders. I was and am a leader, in my opinion, and I know why people change jobs. I've had 35 years of practice having conversations about that. And a lot of people will tell you that money is the driving force, but it's not. It never has been. And that doesn't mean people don't want money. It doesn't mean people don't like money. But to your point, and it's a different word, but it means both of what you just said, in my opinion. It's appreciation,
Yeah,
which is both contribution and acknowledgement.
yeah,
It's like you did a good job. And I think it's the most lacking trait in leaders today
yeah,
is if leaders can do a lot of things well, but they don't do that well. They criticize in public when they should criticize in private, and they either don't praise or they praise in private, and when you should be praising in public. And it's
yeah.
not
But
difficult, but it's really missing in a lot of the leadership that I've
yeah,
talked to.
but there is a difference between a career, right? You're right now we're talking about career. You're being compensated for that. So I'm not suggesting that's not super important. It has a lot of contribution. But how about when you're not being compensated for something, where you're just um, giving or you're providing something and receiving no compensation for it. There's no money, I
Mm-hmm.
should say, no monetary compensation for it. That's a whole other level of
It is, but I also think that you and both of us have talked about this, but I think in the absence of compensation, I think what you're doing when you're giving back contributing and impacting people in a positive way, whether it's part of your life's work or that's not the way you think about it at all. It's you're aren't you automatically saying this is an expression of my gratitude, so I'm giving back because of how grateful I am. And then
Yeah.
you attach yourself to that thing, that group of football players or that high school or that community or that team, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's break that down because I appreciate you recognizing that. I think you pulled that out of me. I didn't realize I said I start off with gratitude because I had this gratitude. I did the 18th Hayward High football alumni camp out. So this is number 18. We do this every year in my backyard. I'm fortunate to have a large piece of property where the entire Hayward High football team, varsity team shows up, and they get dropped off by the coaches and their parents. And from 6 p.m. on Saturday until 12 p.m. on Sunday, they're they're mine. So we feed them. So I'll go through the whole process, but this year was particularly special because 18 years ago, the first one I did, um, the head coach, which is the head coach now, that was the first one I did. That was his senior year. The athletic director for Hayward High, that was his senior year, and then three other coaches, three of them had their master's degree, all came back, and now were the coaches that dropped them off. So there was them 18 years ago,
Yeah,
and you see the impact.
that's incredible. Yeah,
Yeah, it
that
really is
there's
incredible. Just
yeah.
because we were such a part of their life, right? The relationship. It was a special class, obviously, but I've been to their weddings, I've been to their graduations, I've been to their father's services, I've been through all of them, stayed in, and yeah, maybe helped out a little bit monetary, like bought a laptop here or there, something like that. But I saw them grow up, right, from Hayward High all the way to where they've
You
come
know,
back
I,
and
I I wonder how many people get to see like you get to see the level of your impact. You get to
yeah,
taste it and touch it and feel it and watch it. That's incredible. You know,
yeah,
and the other thing, Jim, before it escapes me, and I'm not saying this because I think that you're not. You obviously are grateful, but my goodness, it's isn't it wonderful to you're changing lives. You know, you're changing lives, and I think that it's just I don't know. I do want you to send me
yeah.
some of those pictures and
Yeah,
videos
I'll
because
say, but I also just start off the weekend because it started on actually started a week before that because when the athletic director now and one of the coaches um, got married the week before, so that was quite a beautiful wedding. So it's a continuous summer event. But Friday night they have their first home game. It's against the crosstown rival, the Catholic school. So this is the public school. There's actually three public schools in Hayward, and one Catholic school. So a total of four. So they were playing crosstown rivals, and they were state champions. So again, this is one of those stories where you have the public schools with no resources, right? But then the Catholic school with all the resources. Um, but the coolest part was when I arrived to the game. I had another event, so it was like halftime. And remember, this field, I helped raise the $240 million that the bond measure that was passed that redid the facilities because they had terrible facilities. So
hmm
it was a big part of that. I was yeah, that was a huge when I started this 18 years ago. So they have this brand new field that's just absolutely amazing. It overlooks the San Francisco Bay, and it's top one of the best facilities, I think. So they didn't have that before. They would have to play basically in dirt years before that. But to see this crowd just completely packed, so that
hmm
I mean that alone, and just it's the first week of school, right? Kids are just happy, excited.
hmm
Everybody gets along. There's no tension, and yeah, that's an area that wasn't like that before. And this is this is not. Uh, it's a good area, but it's near Oakland, right? There's some bad stuff that goes on in this area, but
Yeah.
but everybody got along. You see the parents, so that's kind of cool. So they win the game.
Mm.
They beat the state champions. So of course they're super excited. They show up the next day. They sit down. We cook like 200 pieces of chicken, so it's a lot of work. But the message is pretty much the same. That's what I was saying. The gratitude was I was reflecting on the message that I had for their coaches 18 years ago, and I'll go through for some of them. But the first thing that they do, because remember, some of them were there the year before. Some of the players have never been there, so that's an experience in us alone. Just to be invited to this home, right? This is a whole experience. But the first thing they do when they sit down, because I have a long table, it's and this year was a good group, like 35 players. So I have them sit down. The food's waiting for them, and they first thing I says, "Well, welcome. Welcome to my home. You've been invited. Um, this is the 18th Hayward High football camp out. There's a reason why you're here. You were here because you did something that most people can't do, and that's show up. Somehow you made it on the varsity team, and as a result, you were invited to my home because I value people that show up. And then I go into this, about 90% of life is showing up. And if you can show up, but it's hard to show up, but you just qualified. And I talk about life. I said that the mission of the Hayward High football alumni was to prepare you for life. And everything you need to know about life is in this football game. It's all right there, right? You have to show up. You have to buy in. You have to show up when it's cold, when it's hot. You have to show up. But if you show up you show up on time, you show up all the time, you show up prepared, you just became part of the next 90%, and you get better and better. And as a result, you can apply that to everything you do in life. And then I'll remind them that the last whistle and the last bell. So I said, so I'm preparing you for the last whistle, which will happen hopefully in the playoffs in sometime in November. And you're going to go from hero to zero. Like it became basketball season at that moment. So the coaches and everybody, you're just not going to be as important. You're not the big guy on campus anymore, right? But really, when that last bell rings in June, your life's going to change. You were prepared for socialism. You're going to be released into capitalism, and you're going to have to go out there and make it. And everything that you've learned in this game called football, you can apply it to life, but it's not easy. It's not easy at all. You got to show up. And then I have some quotes I'll say, just don't wish it was easier. Wish you were better. It's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one. Yeah, that's a really just such a lovely thing. The other thing that struck me, and I've said this to you before, just to remind you, you stayed where you grew up, or essentially. You're not
you got to remember where I live is not where I grew up.
I know.
So this is the 1% and the 99%.
Right, and that contrast is worthy of attention. But what I also add to that is even though you're not in the same town, you're within driving distance. You remained in home essentially. Yeah. I left and moved to Florida, having grown up outside of Boston. So my entire circle of support are people that I met when I was in my 30s, not when I was in my teens. Yeah. So that we are not only do we live in two very different states and across the country from one another, but we also have that kind of comparison, and it's different. I had to go. My babysitter was not my sister. My babysitter was not my cousin or my grandmother or anything like that. It's just like it's interesting.
It's like you said, it's a different situation. But yeah, I do say the reason that I do this every year is because if it hadn't been for Hayward High football and growing up in that environment at that time, right? I talked about it before, right? That's the mentality, the 5 M's, right? The mentality, the mindset, the machine, and the greatest gift I was ever given was the ability to compete. And that's why I go back, and I talk a little bit about, my 5 league championships, my national championships in rugby and business. I don't get too much into that. I just say that it hadn't been for what I learned playing football at Hayward High, then none of this would have been possible. So it is gratitude, and it is explaining to them, and then fortitude, right? Explaining to them life's not easy. You have to develop fortitude and the ability to push through these. And there's going to be low points. And the other thing is letting them know that people do care. That yeah, maybe it was a different time, but we wore the same cleats, we walked the same halls, we wore the same colors. You'll always be part of that. Uh, we
Yeah,
have something in common.
that's a very, very great culture to wrap around a young man who's
Mhm.
developing. And another observation I would make, and maybe you're aware of this or maybe you're not, but when you started talking about how the event begins, you're
Mhm.
here for a reason.
Oh yeah,
What you've just done is begun the process of trying to infuse into these young men their
that's
own levels of self
so
gratitude.
important. Yeah, I just come out and tell them life's a filtration system. Yeah, they're going to try to filter you out. That's just the way it is. So you want to be part of the 10%. You make 90% of the money. It's just the way it is. I'll share one real quick story. It was interesting because that Friday night at that game, I'm in the stands, and there was a kid next to me, and he was a high school kid, and so he was nice. He was just talking, and he was asking me about the game predictions or something like that. So I asked him, I said, "Wait, so what year are you?" And he goes, "I'm a junior." I said, "Well, why aren't you out there playing football?" He goes, "Oh, I played last year." And I go, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "Well, I'm basically didn't make grades. That's what happened."
Mm.
So then he friendly kid, but he started asking me, "Well, who are you?" And I says, "Well, I've been involved with the program for years. And I run the alumni. Um, in fact, I have been having the camp out at my house tomorrow night. Have you heard about that?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I heard all about it." Da da da. And he goes, "Hey coach, can I come? Can I come?" And I said, and I just remember pausing. I looked at him. I said, "No, man, no, you got to be on the team. You can't come.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
didn't make it." I said, "How about next year? I want to see you here next year. You go. You're doing the right thing. Go get your grades right. But I want to see you at my house next year. But you didn't make the team, man. You can't come." It's that
Well,
simple.
it's the kindness of that. The kindness is both in the firmness of your answer,
Yeah,
but it's also, I want to see you next year. You have an
absolutely.
opportunity in front of you.
Yeah,
If you want to come, go earn it. And I'd love to see
yeah,
you. That's a really
and
kind thing to say, you
yeah.
know?
And I remember sharing that story with the players the next morning at breakfast about that. Like, you know, of course, I didn't reveal his name, but it was, yeah, he's not invited, and you got to
Yeah.
be on the team. It's
Yeah.
hard to be on the team. You got to show
Yeah.
up.
And
It's that simple.
that
So
makes all of them feel even more accomplished. I mean, if you can infuse, and I think you've done that. Whether it lasts or not will be circumstantial, and what they'll do with the rest of their lives. But I think the biggest thing that kids can benefit from today is hope, and
yeah,
we've done a lot of things to get hope out of the way. And what you've just done in a couple of in one evening is infuse hope. And boy, those seeds are planted, man. Let's hope they all grow. You know,
yeah,
well, to wrap up, I think self gratitude is very challenging. It is for me, but I do know that I have created a self awareness with some self reflection. I've committed to it, and I'm making it a part of my day, and have been for years now. And I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that I'm pretty hopeful. I'm pretty optimistic, and not 100% of the time, every day, all the time, but the vast majority of the time. And I think practicing self gratitude contributes to that.
yeah, no question. So, all right, Mark. Until next week.
Thanks, Jim.